the way that we look at it is figure out what your strengths are, figure out what you're missing, and then go to your local meetups and figure out who is good at what you're missing. And then say, hey, I got this, I'm missing this and this. How can we figure this out?
If you're an active real estate investor and you're looking to do larger deals, you're in the right place. We are going to go and take the conceptual type of stuff that you listen to from other real estate podcasts and bring it down to the tactical, the nitty gritty, the actual actionable types of things that other real estate investors that went big did to grow their own real estate empire. You're listening to the Go Big Live podcast. I'm your host, Matt Druin. Hey, everybody. What's going on? I am Matt Druin, host of the Go Big Live Real Estate Investors podcast. I have a really awesome guest on with me today, a partner in crime with a former guest of mine, Mr. Andrew Freed. I have on Zach Gray, who's former military personal trainer, currently owns a strength and conditioning business in the Worcester, Mass area. Am I saying that right, Zach?
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate the intro. Thanks for so much for having me on to the show. Just to kind of give a little bit of a background. Yeah, I think Matt hit on a couple points. Ex-military guy. And I do run a strength and conditioning facility in a submarket of Boston, located in Needham, Mass. And that's kind of what I do on the day-to-day. But as real estate for me has become a more impactful part of my life, I'm slowly but surely reducing my role in that business. And sort of, I have a great team and a great set of delegates that work beneath me that are really taking hold of some of the responsibilities there as I sort of evolve into being more materially involved in a bigger way in my real estate endeavors.
Sweet. So I want to get into all that, especially on the ops side of things. But first, I asked the question, man, it's a doozy. You ready for it?
Yeah.
You were born and now you're here. What happened in between, man?
All right. That's a big one. So just to kind of give you guys a little backstory, I grew up relatively not well off. My dad was a sole provider. He probably worked about 70 hours a week, 75 hours a week, 6 days a week. And we had Sundays were sacred. And I don't mean like holy sacred. I just mean that was the day my dad was home. And I think it was the day that I looked forward to the most as a kid. And I think that what I realized is I really respected, and in a big way, my dad's work ethic every single day, waking up at 5 a.m, getting out of the house by 5:30, 6 a.m, coming home at 7 p.m. And that was 7 days a week. And so that was the only thing that I knew or that I saw from a young age. And I think that, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And I think my mom did a really great job of instilling great values in myself and in my siblings. And I think that we were raised in an environment where we rented apartments for a significant period of time. We were definitely on some assistance in regards to, food, medical care, things like that. And what really shifted things to a degree was my dad over time developed some professional success and was able to move up in his career and make a decent wage. And it was also that kind of paired with my grandmother actually submitted a down payment on a house in a better school district. So we ended up moving from kind of like the poor town to the more affluent kind of like suburban white picket fence kind of vibe. And during that time, I ended up effectively being the poor kid in the rich kid town. And, I went to high school. I'm driving a beater that I saved up $1,000 for. And all my friends are driving BMWs, going to the Cape on the weekends, going on ski trips and, to all inclusives in the wintertime. And like, I'm working part-time at Wendy's. So it was just a different life. And kind of fast forward to the tail end of high school. My entire time in high school, my parents had kind of told me that if I excelled academically, that things would be taken care of for me and that I would be able to pursue continuing education. And I was, my goal was I wanted to be the first person in my entire family to go to college. No one in my family had ever gone to college. And so I grinded all the way through school. And I ended up graduating toward the top of my class, top 10, top 15%. I did a good job. And I got to the tail end of high school, and probably about 2 weeks before I was supposed to make my decision on where I was going to go collegiately. And at the time, I had applied to I applied to double digit schools. I got into all the schools I applied to. I actually
Mhm.
had a couple offers to play some low level baseball. And my parents sat me down and they said, there's no easy way to tell you this, but we have to file for bankruptcy and we have no way for you to go to college.
Wow.
And it was during that time I was 3 weeks away from graduating. I ended up quitting my Legion baseball team. I worked two full-time jobs, probably 40 hours a week each, 80 hours a week from May until September. And my
Mhm.
number one prerogative was to have enough cash to pay for my college experience. I decided I was going to commute and go to a state school.
Mhm.
And the reason being is I didn't want to incur debt. And I think that a big portion of that was tied to what I just saw my parents go through. And I think that debt to me was the enemy.
Mhm.
And now we're obviously much further along in my life. And I have learned a lot during that time. And I actually now view debt as a tool through my experience. And there's a lot, I think, that I've learned a lot over the years. But effectively, what I was able to do was pay for my entire freshman year in cash and not incur any debt.
Mhm.
And what I'll tell you is that experience was humbling. And it was because I had my eyes set on being able to be the first person in my family to go to college. And I
Mhm.
wasn't going to accept a loss in order to do that. And I went through with that, and I went through my freshman year, and I probably worked about like 35 or 40 hours a week my freshman year.
Mhm.
And I got to the tail end of my freshman year, and I was like, that was horrible. I don't ever want to do that again. There's got to be an easier way to do this. And I decided that I was in good enough physical shape and had the tools to be able to endure. I was like, if I could work 80 hours a week and I could work 30 hours a week in high school and I could work 40 hours a week full time in college, and grew up playing sports, dealing with some crazy MFers that were coaching me, I can certainly endure the military, no problem. And I
Mhm.
saw that as a path, and I viewed it as simply a transaction. I said, I'm going to sacrifice 6 months of my time. I'm going to go through training. I'm going to get the rest of my school for free. It's strictly transactional. And by the time that I get done with my term as a reserve, I'll have a degree for free. I won't have any debt, and I'll be on my merry way. And
Mhm.
I ended up doing that. And I finished my degree. I actually, for my remaining 3 years, I actually got my financial aid package reimbursed to me. So I actually ended up getting paid roughly about 12 to 15K a year to go to school. So I
Mhm.
actually graduated college up 45K and then accepted my first job and moved out of my parents' house the day after I graduated. And
Wow.
during that time frame, there's been even a crazy amount that has changed since then. But I think that's a testament to just my backstory, who I am, what my childhood was like, and from a work ethic standpoint, where I developed this mentality of failure is not an option. What it comes down to is I just simply operate from a standpoint of how can I figure this out? What is the answer rather than accepting defeat? And I'm very thankful for that. And it's helped shaped me in a way to be in the position that I am today.
Mhm.
And, it goes back to that deep seated position of what my childhood was like.
Mhm. Yeah, I want to pause there for a second. I want to take this a little bit further after that, but just to like from a from an ability to relate to your story. I mean, I couldn't relate to the story of like working, 2 40-hour jobs. Like I don't even think I have the work ethic to do that. And I know you recognize it as sucking supremely. But, my parents kind of the same story. Like, we lived in the city of Rochester. Schools were really terrible in the city of Rochester. So they basically used the equity in their house and every penny they had to buy whatever house they could afford in a good school district. And I grew up in the same sort of thing with, you know, now this is me being a little brat. Like I got a hand me down vehicle that was a beater, right? It was like a, really old rusted out Chevy Blazer. Like, and I was like, so much inferiority complex because my friends were driving like, like BMW, Lexuses, and that sort of thing. And like, and me as a kid is like, I got given a car. I didn't even have to pay for it. But I had that inferiority complex, like being sort of like living on the poor side of the tracks in an affluent town. And I, kind of developed a chip on my shoulder for that, wasn't pleasant during the process, but I think that like gave me my, a sense of like direction and drive to really prove myself with, having fewer resources and just being more resourceful. So I think that's really awesome and part of like to hear that in terms of your formative experience. So that being said, why real estate, man? Like, fast forward a little bit, like, you started your own strength and conditioning. So actually, let's talk about that, man. Like what caused you to go the self-employment, owning a business route, and then how did that segue into real estate?
Yeah, it really stemmed from when I was in the military. One of my close contacts was a personal trainer as a civilian during my basic training months. I became good friends with him. I ended up coming home. At the time, I was still in college, still working 30 plus hours a week. I'm making minimum wage, dead end jobs. And I said, there's got to be a way for me to make more money. And I said, hey, I've gotten really good at this fitness thing, and I really like this fitness thing. And I said, I wonder what it would cost me to get certified. And I could certainly make more money doing that. And I could make my own schedule. So that fits in with me being in college. And so I sought out that route. And what I ended up doing actually was I got the cert, and then I went and applied at a bunch of gyms, and the gyms wouldn't give me the time of day because I didn't have the experience. And it's this same situation that everybody deals with, where it's like, how the heck am I supposed to get experience if you're not willing to give me an opportunity? And then like, if I don't have the opportunity, how am I supposed to move forward? It's like the chicken and the egg thing. And so I was like, you know what? F this, F everybody. I was like, I'm just going to do it rogue. And so I basically built my own personal training clientele off of Craigslist. And I was training 20 to 25 people a week on average, driving house to house or having people come to my house and training them when I was in college for like 25 to 30 to 35 bucks an hour cash. And that's kind of how I got started in it. And then when I got done from college, I was like, I got two options here. My degree was actually in finance. And I was like, I already know what that life's going to be like. And I was like, I'll tell you what, it's certainly not going to be good for my health. I'll tell you that much. Number two is I'm going to be sitting at a desk 70 hours a week. I'm going to be a pencil pusher for somebody that's going to basically emotionally abuse me because they hate their life. And I'm not going to get paid well. And it's basically going to be an initiation period for probably 2 to 3 years before I actually receive any sort of compensation that's worth my time. And the alternative is I got offered a training position at probably one of the most luxury and, environment training facilities in the US, which is known as Equinox. And I saw a path there in regards to how I could earn six figures in a matter of probably a year time, if I really committed myself. So I accepted that job. I literally worked 7 days a week for 9 months straight and got myself to a point where I was pushing six figures. And I think that wouldn't have happened had I not taken just sort of this relentless approach to it. And I was able to build up a clientele that was very, very formidable. It was very consistent on a week over week basis. And I did not have very much volatility. And I'm operating in a sector where these people are very high net worth, high earning individuals. So these people are very capable and willing to pay for this service on a reoccurring basis. And, fast forward, COVID-19 hits, gyms are pretty much shutting down. I basically viewed this as an opportunity where I said every single person is sitting at their house right now with jack shit in terms of what they are doing every day. And I said, if I can create a way here to give some semblance of normalcy to these people's lives, then I can really prosper in this environment. And so what I did is I traded in my car. So I traded in my car. I bought a pickup truck. I had a whole bunch of equipment that I had already bought. I purchased a whole bunch more. I threw it in the back of my pickup truck, hit up all my clients and said, I'll come to your house. I'll wear a mask. I'll train you in your garage. I'll train you outside. I'll meet you where it's convenient for you based
Mm-hmm.
off where you have to be. And I'll do it on your terms. And I'll charge less than what the gym was charging. And,
Mm-hmm.
let's make it happen. And a bunch of people were willing to support me and do that. And I was able to not only sustain my business, but also I actually used Facebook community groups to grow my business significantly during this time in the local areas in which I was training. And I think that was sort of the inception of being able to, I think that was the inception of being able to do this. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that afterwards, I think that one of the other things that I also kind of keyed on was how many people had during COVID were trying to source solutions for their kids,
Mm-hmm.
because how many parents were working at home trying to desperately get work done while their
Mm-hmm.
kids are running around hanging from the ceiling fan and are trying
Mm-hmm.
to just like keep themselves busy. Everybody's going crazy. And what I was dealing with is I was like, a lot of these people are training with me before work or taking breaks in the middle, taking breaks before probably 10 a.m. to do it, or are doing it at the end of the day after they get done with work. And so one of the things that I sourced was I said, well, what if I start running this youth program? What if I
Mm-hmm.
start training kids for sports? And then I started putting together a youth program where I started training young kids for sports in the middle of the day. And, shocker special, parents can throw their
Mm-hmm.
kids out the front door and they're like, yeah, sign me up. Like, I don't even care what the price is. So
Mm-hmm.
I started building the infrastructure out for this. And this allowed for me to then bring on a staff member, and it all kind of compounded from there. But effectively, that's kind of how I got to being where I'm at in regards to business. And I think that as I was trying to scale my business, my number one concern was, how do I mitigate risk for myself? And I think that my biggest way of mitigating risk was mitigating my biggest expense. And I think my biggest expense was my mortgage on my townhouse. And
Mm-hmm.
so I spoke with my wife in very grave detail about this. And I said, look, we are in uncharted waters at this point. I said, nobody knows the severity of what this entails. I said,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to be able to train people next week.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'm rolling with it. Things are going good. Right. But I said, there's always a risk here of just this being completely nixed tomorrow. And she's working a 45K a year job working from home remotely. And I'm looking at it being like, that's not going to fly, man, if we try and do this just that.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, in a very real way, I said, if we're going to do this and we're going to try and protect ourselves here, I said, this is what we have to do. We have to sell the townhouse. We got to figure out a place where we can live for free and have a tenant pay our rent,
Mm-hmm.
and put ourselves in a better position here where if my business in some way is compromised, we're not going to be in the same position my parents were.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that she was supportive of that. And I think that's how it started. And I think then very quickly thereafter, it just exponentially evolved into a whole different animal. And I think that's kind of where we are today.
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that full circle, man. So let's talk about, we're talking about the green room here about your first like big deal, or what was big for you at the time, and kind of like where that moment happened where it flipped the switch in terms of like, I need to scale this bigger, and kind of let's go into granular detail on that opportunity.
Yeah. So I won't hit on the same deal that Andrew used because we were in on it together. So that's not fair. What I will say is, I think that there's been at least a handful of times where we've executed transactions where he's looked at me and been like, dude, we can't do this. Like, we are not going to be able to do this. And I was like, A, we can do this. B, we have the resources. C, I was like, we got the plan. We'll figure this out. And if we can't figure it out, we know people who are more experienced than us that will step in and that will figure it out for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of the person who like puts the throttle down and I'm like, listen, we're doing this, and make him uncomfortable. And I think that he's the person who's like, Zach, like I don't know if it's gonna work. The funniest part about that is that my kind of oh shit moment happened way before him, which is funny because he would definitely say like I'm the lunatic out of the two of us. So in the first, so my big deal where I would say where I first was like, I don't know how this is going to happen, is I had bought in my first house hack and I had bought in my second house hack, and I had taken a HELOC prior to buying my second house hack on my first one. And I had a significant amount of money stored away. And I had met Andrew only maybe one or two times at meetups in my local area. And what I had said to him is I said, he said to me, he said, what? He said, what are you looking to do? And he said, what's important to you? And I said, I'm looking to scale. I'm not playing games. And I said, what is meaningful to me is people who are looking to take action. I said, if you want to play games and you want to like, if you want to just like talk the talk and not actually make moves, like you're not the person for me. And he was like, I identify with that, man. He's like, that's me. That's where I'm at. I'm trying to go 250 miles an hour. And I don't even know like how much gas I have. I don't know what my tire pressure is. He's like, but I'm trying to go 250. And it's like, all right. I was like, we're in the same boat. He hits me up on a Friday night, and we had talked a couple times in the meetup. And I was like, if you find a deal that you don't think you can take down by yourself, but you want to rip it, I was like, hit me up. Mm-hmm. Calls me up at a Friday night, talking 100 miles an hour, being like, he's like, dude, I found this great deal. It just came on the MLS. It's been on for like 13 minutes. Da 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 da. Here's the pro forma. And I'm like, I'm in. Mm-hmm. And he's like, just like that, you're in? And I was like, I'm in, man. I was like, I told you, I'm not playing around. I said, set up the showing. Let's go look at it. If we like it, let's get it going. Mm-hmm. And he's like, well, what about partnership? What about this? What about that? I said, dude, none of it matters unless we get the property under contract, right? Mm-hmm. So let's go get the property under contract and then let's go talk about it. We went and walked the property. We had the first showing. We walked the property. It was in pretty good condition. I said, let's give them asking price. This was at the time of crazy low rates. I said, waive the contingency. I said, let's rip this. You and I have an eye for what's wrong with the property. It's not rocket science. Like we know what's wrong with the property. And we ended up, we literally signed the offer over cell phone, DocuSign on the curb. And we literally sent it to the listing agent. We're like, send that to your seller right now. Like, you got 5 showings coming. Send that to the freaking seller right now. And he was like, okay. So he sends it to the seller, and he's like, these guys are standing here. They're willing to pay list, and they're waiving everything. And he was like, take the offer. And we're sitting there, and the guy's like, but I got 5 showings lined up. He goes, I don't care. Cancel the showings. Take the offer. And we're like, all right. So we got the accepted offer, and he's like, and I was like, hey, man. I said, so I think we're supposed to go grab dinner and probably talk about this partnership, huh? We went and got sushi, and we talked about the partnership. We mapped out all the responsibilities, and I was like, so we were like, this is sunshine and the rainbows, like off to the races. We get 2 weeks before the close, and the lender that we use was like, yeah, guys, so you remember that like 20% down option that I was talking to you about? He's like, yeah. Turns out I can only do 25% down. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, dude, like we close on this property in 2 weeks. I'm like, I got enough money to go 20 to I like to go 20% down and have like a security blanket for the operating account. And like we were like handling construction money. So like we had to come up with like 25% of funds for construction money. And I was like, I literally what like this, and I realized later on, I was like, this is not how you like treat people who are like lending you money. But effectively, he was like, "You're a liar! Like you've like false represented." Like I went off on this guy, and Andrew's like, "What did I get myself into? This guy's out of his mind." And long story short is we ended up coming up with the money out of our own money, and it was like not pretty.
Mhm.
And I vividly remember I was like, how are we gonna make this happen? And I'm like, by the way, this guy at the bank freaking hates us.
Mhm.
And we ended up making it work. We actually fast forward a year. We refied that property. We got 70-ish percent, a little over 70% of our original capital back out,
Mhm.
which was excellent. And that person is now our number one contact surrounding lending. And
Mhm.
he hooks us up on deals left and right. And
Yeah.
we have a great relationship with him. He actually sponsors a meetup that Andrew and I sponsors the meetups that Andrew and I host. And I now host a meetup with Andrew in Massachusetts. And it's all nice when you get to the end of the yellow brick road. But at the time, it did not seem that way. And it seemed like a lot of craziness. And
Mhm.
it seemed at the time like it was big. And now I look at that and it's like we do that on every, it's like that property is just like a run of the mill transaction at this point. It
Oh, 100%. So what was the property like? Like, was it a small multifamily? What was the unit mix on it?
was a 5 unit, all residential. The property was bringing in about $4,700 a month in gross rents across the 5 units. And by month 9, we had the property bringing in close to $8,700 in gross rents. So we
Mhm.
went from 4,700 to 8,700 in 9 months, which is excellent. And we were in it for 650. We got a 50K construction loan. We paid
Mhm.
interest only for the first year. We used the entire construction loan. We're in the property for 700K. And the property just appraised on our refi for 905.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now that's an awesome story on that deal. So we are running a little bit out of time here because we're usually like have like about like 30, 35 minutes for the show. And then we get into like our live Q&A with our
Yeah.
live studio audience. We have some guys in here. So I think we should do a part 2 and talk through your experience in ops and how that's the only way I mean, like you can be a poor operator and just bastardize the hell out of a great deal. So let's get into that in the future on a part 2. But I want to
Love
leave on this here. So you guys are up to about 125 units or so and growing. Maybe that's changed since then. For
it.
those people
Actually,
that,
it
yeah,
actually, it actually has. We set our goal for the year to be 120 units, and in January, we're in the midst of kind of finalizing here. We're going to have close to 34 units under contract in the first month of the year. So, A, it's going to be a good year. B, our unit count's going up, and I'm just excited for what's in store moving forward.
absolutely. So I want to get your advice on, typically most of our investors that listen to the show, maybe own a couple investment properties. They want to scale and go bigger. What's your advice for them?
Number one advice in terms of scaling is write down on paper what your strengths are. What are you good at? Then write down on paper what your weaknesses are surrounding properties. Are you weak at developing lender relations? Do you need lenders? Do you need contractors? Do you need an attorney? Are you good at handling tenants? Are you bad at handling tenants? Are you good at raising money? Are you bad at raising money? The three things that we look at this point, there's three elements to every deal. There's operations, there's the capital, and there's the deal.
Hmm.
In order to be in order to be exceptional in this space, you have to have two of them.
Hmm.
You either have to have operations and the deal, you either got to have the deal and money, or you got to have, what am I missing? Money and operations, right? And no deal.
Yeah.
So effectively, the way that we look at it is figure out what your strengths are, figure out what you're missing, and then go to your local meetups and figure out who is good at what you're missing. And then say, hey, I got this, I'm missing this and this. How can we figure this out? And if you feel like, I think that ultimately real estate is a partner's game. The phrase that we use is people at the bottom compete against each other and people at the top collaborate. If you want to be at the top, you have to be willing to collaborate. If you want to make big moves, you are not going to be able to do this by yourself. You're not going to be able to do it without a partner that's going to help you operate. You're not going to be able to do it without investors that are backing your deals. It is not going to happen for you. You will move exponentially slower if you try to do it rogue. And so I think that the first step is go to your meetup, figure out who compliments you. Number two, every single time you go to a meetup, your number one prerogative is to get as many people's contact information as possible. And you need a place to store those people's contacts so that you can contact them in the future. And you need to, so what we do is we have developed a CRM network, which is effectively a storage system for all your contacts. Store your contacts, identify who they are. What do they do? Are they a buyer? Are they a seller? Are they a wholesaler? Are they an agent? Are they a contractor? Are they an attorney? Identify who they are, give them a label in your CRM, and your ability to scale, whether you are there or not right now, if you do this right now, you will thank yourself later because it will help you move that much faster.
Excellent advice, Zach, man. So if y'all are listening out there in podcast land and you want to get in the live Q&A with the electrifying Zach Gray here, man. So we're gonna have to release this to you because I think we got probably about like 50 like short form content things that you guys can use for your social media because it was that electrifying. But if you want to get direct access to guests like Zach Gray, his partner Andrew Freed, Gina Barbaro, Matt Faircloth, Ashley Kerr, we got Rich Fetke coming on tomorrow, who's comes from the fitness background. You got to join our Facebook group, the Go Big Live Real Estate Investors Group. It's completely free. We give you access ahead of time to our podcasts, access directly to our guests. So we got to get into the live Q&A because we got a few people that are waiting in here. So Zach, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for coming on the show.